Should I post this to my screen?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I never put up the video from last week. Oops.
That one is back here.
It'll probably make it darker. It's okay. Yeah, that works. Trim that.
Hi, Stuart.
Hey, how you doing,
How's it
Ryan?
going?
Good. How are
Pretty
you?
good. Nice.
Good. So, everything good on your end?
Yeah, we are currently traveling cross country back to New Jersey. So we're in Iowa right now and doing it from a hotel room.
Wow.
Yep.
I actually, my group was thinking of, I'm in a large group that wanted to buy a Taco Bell in Iowa. I'm just trying to,
Really?
yeah, I'm trying to, it'd be funny if you're near there, you can eyeball it. Let me just see where it is.
Yeah, we're in Davenport right now.
I have no idea anything. This is in West Des Moines. Do you know where that
I
is?
see. Okay. We passed through it. Yeah, we passed through it a couple hours ago.
Oh, I should have had you look at it.
Oh, hey, you got a haircut.
Yeah,
Hi, Deborah. Yes.
Yes.
yeah, we both did.
Oh, let's see, Ryan. I did 2 weeks ago.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
All right.
So you want to start this anytime?
Is Oanne joining us?
No, she couldn't. The movie seemed too weird or violent to her. She doesn't. As soon as there's violence, she doesn't.
Oh, I
I
fast
see.
forward through that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a great movie in terms of many aspects. So let's see where Ryan goes
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let me.
Yeah, so this is like a post-human kind of world. I think it's like something like 60 years
Mhm.
into the future.
2077.
And right, 2077, and aliens come and wreak havoc, and there are pretty much no humans left on Earth, save for a few people. And Jack and Julia are one of those few. And,
Are they?
well, yeah, they're one of few. There are still those
And the
aliens
scabs.
Yeah, right. The humans disguised as the aliens, they're still roaming around. But this was from like an invasion type thing, a war that was going on. The humans came out victorious overall, but there were still some aliens roaming around. And so his job, Jack, is to sort of like prune the area, make sure there's no more chaos. And in a couple of weeks, he's done with his mission or his job, and he gets to fly back to Titan, which is where humanity has relocated. And so part of this war that had gone on, the moon got destroyed. And that's the first thing I want to look at here is what would happen if we didn't have a moon. And we pictured that the moon is just completely vaporized. So, quite a catastrophe would happen here on the planet because the moon is responsible for a lot of things. One of which is the planet's axial tilt. The moon keeps it nice and stable. So it doesn't wobble over.
Oh, I never heard that.
The rotation
before.
rate.
Oh.
Yeah. Also, the rotation rate is heavily influenced by the moon going around the Earth. So the moon is tidally locked to the planet. And what's happening is the Earth's rotation is starting to slow down more and more as the moon pulls on it. And it's also causing the tides that we see on Earth. So the oceans coming in and then receding. Eventually, we won't have a moon. This is like in a few billion years. And I think I may have touched on this a few meetings ago, that in a few billion years, around the same time, the sun is supposed to engulf the first three inner planets. The moon is going to be wandered off by then. And at that point, Earth's tilt won't be stable anymore, and it will be susceptible to toppling over, sort of like a spinning top as it falls on its side. But we don't have to worry about that for a couple billion years. There was a video I saw. What was that?
I just coughed.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, there was a video I saw called "What Would Happen If the Moon Disappeared," and it sort of goes, it touches on all the points I mentioned, and sort of what are the consequences if we just didn't have a moon, it just vanished. So I'll play this short clip for you guys. And I think you can see this, right? The moon in the center. Can you see the video playing?
Yeah, well, it's
Okay.
not playing yet.
Not playing, just a set of stills.
Earth's
Okay.
rotation actually slowing
Yeah.
down. What if one night the moon simply disappeared? Would we miss it?
How would we know when Easter and Holy and Passover were?
1,000 times brighter than the next brightest night sky object, Venus. So without it, every night would be as dark as a new moon, and stargazing would be spectacular. But by the next morning, you'd begin to realize just how important the moon is for life on Earth. Between the sun, Earth's rotation, and the moon has the largest influence on Earth's. Without it, high and low tides would shrink by an estimated 75%. This would jeopardize the lives of many types of crabs, mussels, and sea snails that live in tidal zones, and disrupt the of larger animals who rely on them for food, threatening entire coastal ecosystems in the process. Within a few decades, we would start to see mass population declines in the sea and on land. One of the largest spawning events in the world occurs in the Great Barrier Reef. Each November and the days following the light of a full moon, coral colonies across the reef, spanning an area larger than the state of New Mexico, release millions of egg and sperm sacs within nearly minutes of one another. Scientists are certain that the full moon plays a role in the timing, but exactly how remains a mystery. On land, animals like these red crabs also use lunar cues to reproduce. After living most of their lives on the mountains, millions of adult crabs migrate down to shore. And then, only during the last quarter of the moon, females release their eggs into the sea. Now, the moon may not hold as much sway over human reproduction, but without it, something we care equally about would change: the weather. Tides and tidal currents waters with warmer waters in the tropics. This balances temperatures and stabilizes the climate worldwide. Without the moon, weather forecasts would be practically impossible. The average difference between the hottest and coldest places on Earth could grow to life-threatening extremes. But none of this compares to the biggest change that we would have coming over the next millennium. Right now, Earth tilts on an axis at 23.5 degrees, mostly due to moon's gravity. If the moon disappeared, Earth's axis would wobble between anywhere from 10 to 45 degrees. Some experts estimate that Jupiter could help keep Earth's tilt from reeling completely out of control. But even just an extra 10-degree tilt could wreak havoc on the climate and seasons. In the past, Earth's tilt has changed by about 1 to 2 degrees, which scientists think could have caused ice ages in the past. It's hard to know what a 10-degree or 45-degree tilt would do, but probably nothing good for most life on Earth. The moon isn't just imperative for life on Earth today. Experts believe that it might have also played a key role in the 4.5 billion years ago. Turns out the moon isn't just a beacon of light in the night sky. Its existence is crucial to the delicate balancing act that makes life here possible.
So he said that a huge percentage, but not 100% of the tidal variation, the tides, would disappear. So why would there be tides without the moon?
So
Any degree.
the sun also exerts a tidal force on the earth. It's pretty insignificant when you compare it to the moon, but in fact, the tides that we experience here on earth are actually stronger during a full moon than, let's say, a first or third quarter moon. And that's
Yeah.
because the earth, the sun and the moon are in opposition. So they're kind of
Yes.
pulling on the earth in opposite directions.
Uh-huh.
So the sun also plays a role in the earth's tides. And we see that here because they're more dramatic when the moon is in a full or new phase. And I think there's a really interesting diagram that shows just how dramatic the tides can change during the phases of the moon. Let me see. I read this a few months ago.
Yeah.
Find this little calendar they have. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So, okay, this is just day to day. Try to find, okay. If we go to like May 3rd, what does it look like? Plot calendar. There we go. That's what I was looking at. So you see, when it's a full moon, I think, so when was the full moon? The full moon was like late
The
March.
28th.
The 28th. So the next full moon will probably be on the 27th. And you see it goes down about a foot and then it goes up by almost 4 feet. So this is like a 5-foot differential between the
Yeah.
tides, the low tide and the high tide. It's like 5 feet. But now you go to like the 18th. So that should be when it's first quarter, and there's less than a foot, or they're at the same period of time as the 27th. It does get up to 3.5 feet, but this is only a 3-foot differential over the course of almost 24 hours. This one you increase by 5 feet in just a quarter of a day. So that is the role of the sun in Earth's tides. It's causing a more dramatic shift when the sun and moon are in opposition. So pretend the Earth is my head. This is the sun.
Yeah.
They're pulling on my head a lot more strongly at opposition rather than if the moon was here and the sun is here. Then the tides aren't as dramatic.
Yeah. So this is for April,
Yeah, this is April. This is
the 18th.
Baja California, I think. These are the tides in California, and you can pick any location you want. If we can go to Cape Canaveral, Florida. So this is like what I'm familiar with.
Are you from there?
Well, I went to grad school in Melbourne.
Ah,
So I was at Florida Tech. This was right next door.
yeah.
Yeah, here we see pretty much the same thing, almost a 5-foot differential here, but it's not quite as smooth during the first quarter phase. You
Yeah,
still
that's
have
the first quarter. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. You can
Yeah.
predict the tides. this
Here's a
handy.
moon calendar.
Yeah, this is on NOAA.gov.
Yeah.
Another thing
famous
about
moon calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. You could be on my moon calendar Christmas card list too.
another interesting thing that was mentioned in the video is that without the moon, the axial tilt would keel over to some degree. And this will happen eventually as the moon starts to recede from Earth, in a few billion years. Just a little bit of a tilt change, a few degrees, can throw the climate out of whack completely. So severe that you end up having like tropical weather in Russia and like tundra weather in Africa. So I think it would be pretty insane to have just completely flip-flop just because the Earth tilts maybe 10 degrees off its original axis.
So, is there a correlation with, well, it's precession now, right?
Mhm.
And glacial periods and snowball Earth and
Definitely. Yeah. So Earth is constantly precessing. So aside from the moon's influence, the Earth undergoes some precession.
What does
And
precession mean?
Precession is like if you spin a top and you watch the very point of it over time, it starts to make these small circles. So it's spinning really, really rapidly. But if you watch the tip of the top, it does a small circle, and that small circle making is called precession. And I think there was a nice YouTube video on it. I think 60 Symbols made a video some years ago.
60 symbols.
I want to talk about axial precession, which is a complicated thing, and it involves rotating objects. So axial precession is where you've got an object which is spinning. Here's the Earth, which looks like a perfect sphere, but it's not, and it's rotating. We hope we've got it the right way around this time. I'm also going to talk about a gyroscope. If I were to take this gyroscope and just leave it there, it's quite well balanced. And if I rotate it around, and it stays where it is. If it's perfectly balanced, nothing moves. And now, just let me move this thing, this extra weight, so this is unbalanced. And then you can see the effect of changing the balance. If I put it there, this will drop down, it will oscillate in a very simple-minded way, just like a pendulum. So now let me rotate this. And everybody seeing this will imagine that the effect of rotation is just to let this drop down, but it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that at all. This motion round is called precession. It precesses around this axis, so I'm going to call it axial precession.
So the reason the Earth does that, the reason the Earth wobbles as it's spinning, is the mass isn't evenly distributed across the entire planet. So the Earth is not uniform density, it's not even uniform shape. It's a little bit oblate. So the equator is a bit fatter than the circumference going around the poles. And since the density is not equal all the way around, you have this spinning body that's going to want to prefer, what do you call it? The moment of inertia with the least, it's gonna prefer an axis with the least moment of inertia. I don't want to get into the angular momentum mechanics about it, but the reason it wobbles is just because Earth is not a perfect sphere and it's not uniform in density. That's why it wobbles a little bit. And so, yeah, going back to Deborah's point, we experience ice ages every 10 or so thousand years, because that's sort of the period when the poles start to point different ways. So we can have massive changes in the climate.
How often have there been ice ages every 10, 20, 30, 40,000 years?
I think, and it's not even that regular, but I think the last one was about 10,000 years ago.
Right, but has this gone back for, millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of years?
For sure.
No.
We've had several ice ages, I think. Glacial period.
There have been several glacial periods, and there have been at least one and probably more where the entire globe was iced over. It's referred to as snowball Earth. But that has to do with the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, maybe chilling the planet. And that has to do with volcanism like 3 billion years ago.
I see. Yeah. So I think
not with precession or anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I recall hearing about a snowball Earth, but I think it's really more of a hypothesis rather than a theory.
Well, that you can find geological evidence of it. I mean, I've seen geology that I was told this is evidence of snowball Earth. This is from snowball Earth. I can't remember what was special about the geology per se, but glaciation in Oman, wherever Oman was on the globe at that time, it could have been down by the below the equator. But
yeah, so there is evidence, but it's not like 100% compelling. So
yeah.
Reading here, people do contest this hypothesis by saying that we don't know if the entire ocean could have been covered in slush. So they're saying like ocean has an extremely high heat capacity. To freeze over the entire ocean is like a crazy undertaking for something like the size of the Earth. So yeah, opponents of the hypothesis say that it's unlikely that all of the oceans could have turned to slush or ice. So I think there is better evidence that like much of the continental parts of the globe have been covered in ice, and that they get that evidence from doing, I think it's ice cores. I think when they go to Antarctica, they can dig up ice cores and they can figure out the concentration of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And you're right with the volcanism, like when you do have these extremely volcanic events, you can, but I don't know what the time period is. Like there were 2 major explosions that totally messed up Earth's climate, but it only lasted for about a year. Like in 1816, Mount Tambora erupted, and then we had the year without summer.
But longer than that ago, there was a Siberian huge volcano that created a glaciation period. But this was much earlier than that, when the Earth was still just solidifying from being a sea of molten lava, in the billions of years ago. So it was just solidifying, and there was a lot of volcanism through what was ever solid. Yeah.
I see. I imagine that sounds plausible. I imagine that, but I don't think I've heard of that. That's really interesting. That there could have been an ice age or a snowball Earth billions of years ago before the Earth had like cooled off enough.
Well, I was looking at it one of these past evenings and on YouTube, of course. But I wouldn't know how to find it again. But I'll go looking while you're talking.
Okay. So, yeah, next point I wanted to get to is what would Earth look like without humans? And
Better.
so, yeah, it would probably a lot better over the course of time, course of a long time. We're talking about like a few decades. So 50 to 100 years. How is Earth going to change? And is there any leftover construction, manufactured, buildings and structures that look pretty much unchanged or at least intact after, several decades of humans gone? There was a really cool series on the History Channel called Life After People.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I watched it. That was cool.
yeah, one of my favorite bits of this was looking at 50 years after humans, what Earth probably looks like. Let me get to the right part. Okay.
Yeah.
Steeple of Boston's 18th century Old North Church is on the verge of collapse.
The steeple, being taller, is going to be more susceptible to a big storm than the rest of the building. It would fall sooner.
Hmm.
Its guiding light of the American Revolution has been extinguished. 35 years after people is long enough to turn coastal cities like Boston into ghostly wrecks. How do we know this? It's a future that has already happened in a place nearly 7,000 miles from Boston. This island was the most densely populated place on Earth until man disappeared. "35 years after people, our homes, offices, and factories are cracking and sagging as nature executes its hostile takeover. This is a future that has already come to pass in one remote corner of the world. Several miles off Japan's southwestern coast, a forsaken island stands lifeless and decaying.
This island, as you can see, is a slab of concrete sitting in the middle of the ocean with high-rise buildings sprouting from it. Completely empty. No one living here anymore. No electricity, no vegetation, nothing.
It's called Hashima Island, once a thriving coal mining town and home to thousands of people. Now, its abandoned offices and apartment buildings are literally exploding under nature's relentless hands.
The island has been left literally to the elements all these years, exposed completely. The wind is carrying all the seawater up into the buildings. The degradation is just startling and remarkable.
Because of the unsafe conditions, Hashima is strictly off limits to visitors. In the 1890s, Japan's Mitsubishi company mined coal from the seafloor beneath Hashima. At its peak in 1959, the 15-acre Anchor Island was home to more than 5,000 workers and their families, the highest recorded population density on Earth. In 1974, as Japan began favoring petroleum over coal, Mitsubishi closed the mine and relocated the entire population to the mainland.
So it's not too dissimilar from what we see in the movie here. So I want to pull it up real quick. This is where Jack is on the football field. Just get this up right. And it's funny, he goes on and recaps the 2017 Super Bowl, but it's kind of weird because on that sign that's, or the concrete, it says 2017 World Champions.
Yeah.
And usually World Champions is reserved for baseball in the World Series.
Yeah.
And Astros were victorious in that one, 2017. But he's like, oh, it's such a classic, iconic game. And it is kind of funny that like the 2017 Super Bowl was one of the most memorable games. Falcons had a 21-3 lead and they blew it to the Patriots.
Where was the game played?
I think it was in Boston. Let me check. I'm not making that up. Oh no, I'm sorry. Because the Super Bowl doesn't do home or away. It's usually a different field.
So it might not, the odds are it wasn't near New York where this move, apparently, since they were at the Empire State Building.
Right.
So that was kind of putting together some.
Oh, it was in Houston, Texas, which is crazy because Houston was also where they played the World Series in 2017.
But that doesn't make any sense with the movie because they weren't flying that far. I mean, to
It was
me,
a different, there were different sites, but it couldn't have been that far.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Took a
and
motorcycle.
I think the movie was made in 2013, so they were just guessing. It's like, all right,
Oh
let's
yeah,
pick a team
that's right. It
to
was
win.
the future. It was 2017. Got it.
Let me share this.
It was make believe.
Exactly. So here he is landing on the field.
Okay, so one of the things they're talking about is that they can't repair some of these drones because they don't have shields available. They need to be restocking these things. So I just read about the space station having shields. And they're of different construction in different parts of the station, depending on what's underneath or what's facing, I guess, in which direction.
Yeah, and I imagine the shields on the ISS are used to protect from solar radiation more than anything else.
Well, this was talking about space junk specifically. It was in
Oh,
the context of junk.
interesting.
So of penetration.
It'd be really hard to deflect against any substantial space junk, especially if it's flying in the opposite direction, because they're going at tens of thousands of miles an hour.
1,700 miles an hour.
1,000.
1,000, yeah. But yeah, so this was the first mention I'd ever heard of it.
Oh, this is just a crazy coincidence, but going to this Life After People, they have a segment, 20 something years after People, and look at the stadium they chose to pick.
The tallest building in Texas,
Really?
over a city that is slowly reverting back to the swamp it once was. It's kept at a steady 72 degrees. Houston's Great Dome Sports Stadiums now swelter to 125 degrees in the summer. They have become enormous bat caves. The artificial grass of the Astrodome's trademark AstroTurf is swallowed up by reeds and muck.
So it's crazy. They used the Houston Astrodome.
That's where they had the 2017 Super Bowl
2017 World Series and the
Oh.
Super Bowl.
and the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So
Wow.
funny coincidence.
Although, yeah, I mean, the implication is if that's the building, what was that, 25 years, it's hard to imagine that 30 years later, it would look like what Tom Cruise saw. Although, I guess the implication is that all the nukes that they used in this war also damaged the world and the building.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Yep. I was comparing it to like, okay, what if it was just completely abandoned versus like having gone through a war where aliens were attacking in some way. So yeah. Interesting thought. And then wanted to look at the moon Titan. And I don't think a lot of the movie takes place on Titan, but it's interesting to think like if we ever go there.
None of the movie takes place on Titan.
Right. Yeah, it's mentioned for a little bit, but none of the scenes actually occur on the moon.
Well, it turns out it doesn't.
Yeah, right. It was just a
That's
story,
fictitious.
fictitious
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, right. They made it up. But it brings up a good connection because Titan is actually a proposed
Mm-hmm.
habitat for future humanity, and we want to look at like why Titan, why that place in the solar system as a future spot for civilization. And two of the most striking characteristics of the moon is that it has a substantial atmosphere. It's the only moon in the solar system with a dense atmosphere.
Yeah, this is why that Dragonfly project
Yeah,
is
I remember
going
you
to,
mentioned that.
yeah, it's going to Titan because it can fly around because of that atmosphere.
Exactly, right. And it's the only moon in the solar system with pretty compelling evidence of liquid on the surface. Like it's pretty ostensible that we have liquid. Now it's not water, it's more like gasoline, but it's an interesting characteristic. Well, the question is like, could we even, let's say that story was true, could we even get a civilization up and running in less than 65 years? First, let's take a look at how long would it take to get to Titan. So I'll just do a quick calculation here. Okay, so a little bit over 1 billion miles. And so I'm not sure what, yeah, if we took humans there, it might take about a decade to get there.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I
once we
think
visit-
Dragonfly's taken like eight years Although, if you're not using, depending on whether they're aligned or not, and how, whether you're using gravity,
Assist.
gravity assist, I think you can get there a lot faster, but it's still a couple of years to get there.
Yeah.
Well-
So
Yeah,
Dragonfly
it says 7 years here.
Yeah. Yeah, for Dragonfly.
launched in 2025, and then it would reach there
Right.
2034, and then
Yeah, it's been delayed to 2027 now, the launch. But.
okay. Yeah. So the key thing to recognize here is this is the estimated time for a probe. Now, a probe travels at a different speed than one that would carry humans. And you imagine like every pound of extra payload you put into a rocket, you need like much more fuel in comparison. I think over like 100 times more fuel or something. So either it's a tremendous expenditure in fuel, or you go a lot slower. And so you think, okay, if we're putting humans on a mission now to go to Titan, how much longer is it going to take rather than just sending an instrument? And then you're probably thinking 20, 30 years, probably. I don't think anybody has done calculations. Let me see if I can find something.
Well, I brought this up in the context of the 80 days, that movie we did it 3 weeks ago, to go from Mars to Neptune, which is twice as far as going from Earth to Titan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they took liberties.
Yeah, let's see.
What was that? Oh, I started to watch Prometheus.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
the planet they landed on in Prometheus was 79% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, and a couple of
Mhm.
xenon, and so it's just like Earth.
Mhm.
So we'll talk about that. What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all these articles are just talking about the robot that goes, but we want to put actual humans on the moon.
On Titan.
So, yep. Let me see. Let's see any. Okay.
Flight.
Yeah.
The fifth one.
Oh, I know.
Oh no, it's not getting there.
Oh, this is flight on Titan.
On
And
Titan.
this is really cool. The air is so dense that you could attach wings to your arms and just flap and be able to take off on the surface, which I think is pretty cool.
Well, again, Dragonfly, is going to be flying around on the surface using, it's taking advantage of this density. What we're sending up there on the mission.
Yeah. So yeah, there's no real talk about how long it would take to send a spaceship to Titan with humans on it. But even if it took, let's say, 20 years, that means you only have, and we're just trying to play along with the movie, see if it really aligns. You only have like 30 or so years to like build a civilization entirely from scratch on a planet that you've never been on before. I'm sorry, a body that you've never been on before. And you start thinking, I was like, how are you going to build anything? So there's discussion on how you would build infrastructure on Mars and using just the regolith, the soil. It's pretty pliable and a versatile material. But on Titan, where the temperature drops to I don't know, something like negative 200 degrees or something. Temperature. Yeah, negative 180 degrees Celsius. It's only 93 Kelvin above zero, absolute zero. In fact, the water, even if there was water on Titan, the water would be as hard as metal. It would be that frozen.
You're saying it's a lot harder to live on Titan than it is on Mars.
I think so. I think it is. I think the extreme temperature, and forget all the other elements that you have to deal with, is enough to make it way harder to do anything productive compared to the moon or Mars. I think, so this is what I wanted to show you guys. This video sort of imagines what it would be like to have a colony on Titan.
Titan is a moon of Saturn, and it is probably the most interesting moon we know of as of right now. But also, it is a huge moon, second largest in the solar system, and it is bigger than the planet Mercury. Because of its interesting features that could support a colony, it is very much a possibility that in the future, this moon might be the second best target to colonize. And outside of the Earth, it is the most non-hostile environment in the solar system, but it is still pretty rough. So let's see, how could a colony possibly survive on this moon? First of all, you would have to get there, and it is a long trip since Titan is 10 times more further away from the sun than the Earth is. Compared to Mars, Mars is only 1.5 times more further away from the sun than the Earth is. So it is relatively close. Trips to Mars to deliver landers and rovers take 7 months on average, meaning a trip to Titan in one direction would be almost 4 years. So as of now, we are trying to get to Mars, which is, as established, much closer, and it is very hard. So a 4-year trip to Titan as a human crew would not be possible as of right now. Only if we invest a good percentage of total money and really start working in the new technology is when will it be possible. But it is still not impossible. So let's go into the future, where it is very much. Before the human crew arrives at Titan, there would also need to be bases already delivered on Titan, since one spacecraft cannot possibly carry everything. So let's see what would the crew need to do. As the crew would step onto the surface of Titan, it would be apparent that the air is very dense, since the pressure is 1.5 times greater than it is on the Earth. And it would be apparent also that they would be much lighter, since the gravity is much lower. So they would all be 7 times lighter than on the Earth. And they would always need to wear oxygen masks and hot suits to protect them from the temperatures that are as low as minus 179 Celsius. And the atmosphere is 98% nitrogen, so oxygen would be essential. The bases and the crew would most likely be suited in the North Pole of Titan, because that's where the huge lakes of liquid methane are. They would be there since the colony's mission would likely be to explore after they settle. And what better place to explore than the only place in the solar system besides the Earth that contains liquids on the surface? The colony would need to supply itself with food and water first, and since they were able to survive a 4-year trip, they likely will be able to settle onto the moon and survive without much of a problem. Since food was successfully grown on the ISS already, and by the time we are colonizing Titan, we likely would perfect that and would have terrariums that would be able to easily sustain a whole colony. What the crew would likely do here is a bunch of science experiments. Most importantly, they would most likely visit lakes and rivers, see what is going on there. There is a bit of a chance that they would find a completely new methane and nitrogen-based life form living in these lakes and rivers. Since such a thing has shown that it could exist, but it would likely be single-celled and very simple. A submarine could also be created, which would allow us to go deep down, find even more things. Where life could also exist is in the waters underneath the surface. That's right, there are oceans with water on Titan. We know that because the surface was very wobbly, which could only be explained by a subsurface ocean. And it is liquid because tidal forces of Saturn, other moons, heat up Titan. Humans could possibly drill down the surface to get to the ocean with a cryo, basically a drill that melts, since the composition of Titan is half water ice, half rocky material. We could also somehow go down the canals of a cryovolcano, since Titan has a cryovolcano. And they do not spew lava, they spew cold materials such as water, ammonia, and hydrocarbons. So going down their canals could also be possible.
So the person who made this video leaves a lot up to the imagination, and he's also very optimistic. It's like, oh yeah, we could just drill down into the crust and extract whatever liquid water is beneath it. And he's like, yeah, we could just heat it up because it's mostly ice. And I feel like that is really, really ambitious. Just take the Earth, for instance. We've never been able to penetrate anywhere close through the Earth's crust. We've never been able to reach the mantle. It just becomes too hot. It becomes like over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. But not only that, as you start drilling into the Earth, the rocks start to behave more strangely. And you get to a point where the rock becomes like plastic, and it makes it impossible to drill any further. And I think the world record for deepest hole,
The Kola Peninsula.
the super deep borehole, went down 40,000 feet. In comparison,
The Kola Peninsula went down 7 miles, as I recall.
Yeah, it's 40,000.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Earth's crust is 40,000 meters. So it barely even made a dent in the Earth's crust. Yeah. Unexpected decrease in density caused the rock to behave like a plastic, making drilling impossible. And so they stopped in 1992, and that's it. That's the farthest we've ever drilled into the Earth. And I don't think Titan's going to be that much different. I think it's going to be just as difficult to drill through solid ice. And even if you were able to heat it up, where are you getting that heat from? How do you generate enough heat to melt whatever's on the surface of Titan? So right there, I think is just an insurmountable challenge. I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but it's crazy to think we'll be able to do that like right away, no problem.
Where are we?
So are we going to discuss the movie? Can we talk about that for a couple of minutes?
Yeah. For
So
sure.
it turns out this movie is a movie about AI, coming in, taking over, because that was all the invaders were all, that was all AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they basically, put this whole, in other words, Tom Cruise and the woman weren't really Tom Cruise and the woman. They were clones that got implanted with the memories from Tom Cruise.
Exactly. And they find, several more just like them.
Yeah,
And
thousands.
were just copies.
In the tent
Right.
when they got in there.
Mhm.
And the woman running the tent was basically, they took that from mission control on Odyssey, which was the spaceship in 2017 that was initially supposed to take humans to Jupiter. And then it got reassigned to investigate the Tet when the Tet arrived near Earth.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why at the end, I assume at the end, just to see if I can understand it, that the Tom Cruise that came at the very end, after the Tom Cruise that blew up in the Tet, was that the other one that the two of them had the fight? You know, the two different clones of Tom Cruise had a fight.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I'm wondering, I assume that the other one that was in that fight was the one that eventually came to, you know, where the woman was with the baby.
Because all the other clones were on the Tet,
Yeah.
and he might have been just stranded on the Earth after the fight. It
Yeah.
didn't occur to me, but it makes sense.
Yeah. So what I think, so Jack had to fight all of the clones of himself, but then in order to finally defeat the Tet, he has to actually sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Him and Morgan Freeman blew up the Tet, and they died when they did that.
And so where did Julia come from? And you know, the other humans that the drones killed. But she was on a spaceship going to...
She was on the Odyssey spaceship, and there were 7 humans on that ship, and that was supposed to go to Jupiter, and they reprogrammed it to the Tet, and then they woke up Tom Cruise, Jack, and Victoria to be his co-pilot when they were going to investigate the Tet. And when Tom Cruise realized that the Tet was going to destroy the ship, he extruded the part of the ship that had the 5 other astronauts in it that included Julia. And that was, and then I think it was Morgan Freeman that somehow figured out a way with his band to send some signal to the Odyssey that was still floating around out there somewhere that got it to come back to Earth.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that, it was confusing to me because, Tom Cruise was unaware of his past. He didn't know like what he used to be.
Yeah,
and he's like,
that
oh,
memory wipe, supposedly.
right, exactly. He's like, oh snap! Like I was the commander of this NASA mission, and yeah, it kind of all unraveled for him right there. What his past really was, and it kind of, I think it like precipitated after all of these events where he's just like hallucinating, and he's like, oh, I'm having this strange dream of like my past, but he's like, I don't remember it happening.
Well, if the theory was that the AI somehow was advanced enough that they could take the mind out of a person and keep moving it, maybe with a neural net or something, into all these clones, and they tried to wipe the memory and say that's what they did, but it wasn't 100%. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
There were deep memories left that were still in that neural net that they put into that Tom Cruise clone.
Yeah, and that was like a really confusing part for me because like the human brain isn't like a hard drive. It doesn't just have a memory where you can just like, okay, here's information and then here's absence of information. Like the brain is an extremely dynamic thing, and to make it analogous to a computer is really not something I can do. Yeah, what was your thought, Deborah?
Well, I was left thinking that the Tom Cruise, the Jack that we saw, through most of the movie was possibly the original, and all the others in all the different tanks and the one he fought with were clones. But it could just be that this was, you know, his memories of Julia and you know, proposing to her at the Empire State Building, all that, were just one part that was either inadvertently transferred or not.
That's what my
erased.
thought was, because, you know, when Victoria was killed, another Victoria came back to the, you know,
Well, what was I realized when I saw it a second time, to a new building.
Yeah.
And that's, yes, and that's what confused Jack when he went there, you know, where's the broken windows?
right.
Yeah. But I love that swimming pool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, I guess that's, you know, so one aspect of this whole movie is, you know, our concern about, you know, AI getting out of control. So in 2013, I guess that was in vogue, and I guess it still is to some extent. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I
AI
think
will eventually.
with the explosion of Facebook and things and Google, and how like they're becoming aware of our presence, it's like, oh, you know, if we continue this trend, there's going to be a point when they become like salient beings. I'm sorry, sentient beings.
Right.
And yeah, that's a really blurry line.
And even right now, you've seen the movie The Social Dilemma?
Mhm.
No.
I mean, you ought to see it. It's a documentary on Netflix. Basically, and it's done by some of the originating people from social media, from some of the high level, you know, computer people that were in Google and Facebook and all that. And they basically were saying that we're already programmed, that much more than we think, that social media is controlling us.
Oh yeah, I become aware of it myself. Like I find myself just like opening up Instagram and Facebook. I'm like, all right, why am I here? And it's really like a mental hack that they've gotten into. It's like, all right, we're controlling you. Like we know exactly how your reward center works in your brain and take full advantage of it. And I am definitely fallen prey to that.
Yeah. It's scary if it really continues, the whole thing.
Yeah. I just figure it's me and laziness. I mean, I can see that in their algorithm, if there's something I click on to watch, then 50% of everything else is the same thing, the same type of subject matter. So their algorithms are very clever, but it's also my laziness that I could stay on it rather than, you know, get about the day.
Well, you better get out while you're still lazy, because 10 years from now they'll hook you even more.
Well, and I'm thinking it's people that are hooking us. It isn't just some artificial intelligence. I think it's, you know, the Putin, the Putin-esque crowd, you know.
Or you could just argue it's corporate America, basically, at some level, you know, who really are much more concerned about ultimate profitability than human freedom. And that's capitalism.
Stuart, I thought you were a capitalist.
Well, I'm suspect of some of these things and where they're going.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, what else, Ryan?
Oh,
did you?
but Stuart, you probably didn't see, because you don't watch it on, like I do, on an iPad, on a computer. But what they said is that the woman computer, Terry, was that her name? Was based on Hal from 2001.
Which woman computer?
The computer in this movie, you know,
Sends Jack messages on the spaceship.
You'd see her face, she'd smile, she'd be talking to Victoria. Okay, So, but she had a very even voice, that she was based on the computer HAL in the movie 2001.
It's interesting. In what way? Because I thought that when, they showed that clip of Jack, of Tom Cruise on Odyssey, I'm blocking her name. What was her name? The woman that was from Control.
Terry.
Mm,
FICA?
no, I
No.
don't know. Whatever. The one with the southern accent.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, she was actually the controller. In reality, at least when Tom Cruise was on Odyssey, she was in NASA. She was in mission control in Texas, controlling Odyssey. So the people in the TET, when they kind of pulled Tom Cruise and his co-pilot Victoria as the humans, they also pulled her imagery off NASA, and the TET became her.
Yeah, okay.
Now, still, I mean, it might be on some level, it was all based on the thematic history of HAL and taking that concept and moving.
Yeah.
But it was more the TET was based. The ultimate the AI that was coming in was like HAL. It was just taking over.
Yeah. Right.
Ryan, what else did you have? Were there any other?
So that was actually it. I had my three main points, which is, what would we do without a moon? What's it going to be like without humans? And then finally, why is Titan a great place to colonize? Those are the three points I took away from the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh.
Well, you're an hour ahead, right? You're almost 10 o'clock in Iowa.
Yes.
Did you want to end it soon or any?
Where are you?
Whatever you feel like. I'm in a hotel room in Davenport, Iowa.
And why are you there?
We're traveling cross country. We're going back.
You're going to Florida?
Eventually, I think later in the year, but for now we'll be in Jersey with our family.
Our Stuart, our friend's son, Aaron Trauner, he just drove back to college in New Hampshire. And he said that nobody in Nebraska wore a mask.
Interesting.
Do you have a lot of mask wearing? Have you gone into restaurants or supermarkets in Iowa?
Yeah, I think most people wear a mask. There are like a few, like one or two every place that just don't have one. I feel like it's gotten a lot more lax in the past couple months.
Yeah. We're thinking it's over, so the numbers are going up like 20% yesterday or something.
Well, is that time 6 o'clock Mountain Time work for you for Prometheus on Wednesday?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Wednesday at 6 we'll do Prometheus.
So that is Wednesday, the 7th of April, 6 o'clock, Prometheus.
Have safe travels.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yes. Have safe travels.
Thank you.
Stay safe. And now you're old enough to get shots.
Yes.
You're over 16, right?
That's right. Yep.
And soon it's going to be over 12 since the Pfizer data is 12 to 16.
Yeah. How about Adrian, Stuart?
Not yet, but as soon as she can get one, I'm sure. They haven't offered it to her at Middlebury yet.
I think some of the colleges are
Starting
talking about it. Yeah.
Be well.
You too.
Take care. Ciao.
All right. See you guys later.
Have a good night. Take care.
You too.
Bye.